Today, I have the pleasure of speaking with Brett Marsh from Spartan Metals. Brett, during Investor Talk this morning, I described you as the dark horse at Wimbledon. We know you have many of the critical minerals that Americans want, and you're in the United States. So let's start with why your New Mexico project is so exciting.
Yeah, our Victorio project in New Mexico is really a significant project for the United States. It's essentially the largest tungsten deposit in the United States, and when I say that, it's two or three or four-fold larger than our nearest competitor in the United States. It's relatively advanced in the fact that it's already got 100 drill holes into it, so it's something that we don't need to spend a lot of time and effort to put into discovery because we actually know what's there. It's really about putting the time and effort into the engineering studies and the development that we need to do to advance this project into production and get that tungsten. We're very excited to have brought the Victorio project in New Mexico into our portfolio because it's something that we believe can really contribute meaningfully to the United States critical metal needs.
Well, you must have had some, I don't know, some foresight to know that tungsten was going to be as exciting as it is, and as it is just, I think many of us think it's just warming up. So, for instance, you actually acquired a former producing tungsten mine that was called Tungstonia. Can you give our audience a little bit of the background and then give us an update because you have actually expanded the mineralization footprint in your most recent news release?
Yeah, so Tungstonia was very interesting to us because of the tungsten in particular, and it was important to me when we founded Spartan to focus on tungsten so that we could actually have a connection to the U.S. national security and critical metals industry. And so when we found Tungstonia, it was really something that we spent a considerable amount of time investigating and really began to understand that it's something that we think is pretty special. And so as we've looked at it now for over the past year here on the surface and done that work, as you mentioned, we've been able to expand the initial mineralization footprint from what we initially assessed when we picked up the project from about 500 meters by about 700 meters to almost 6 square kilometers now, and we've got total strike length in many of our veins that we actually have on the project that are over 2 kilometers. And so we're really excited about that potential. We're currently running geophysics through the area so that we can understand the full scope of these veins and other mineralization that we have around Tungstonia, so we can follow it up with drilling here in August.
You have been putting out milestones and news releases regularly. And so I'm going to ask you, what's the most exciting news that you think you've put out in the last couple of months that you would like to talk more about?
It's really the two things. So it's the very consistent higher grades that we see at the Eagle project between the Tungstonia vein system and skarn system that we have there, and the Reese mine, which we just recently started to understand the potential there, where we've sampled, over 6.7% tungsten trioxide. So that's extremely exciting from a potential standpoint on the exploration. On the flip side, when we look at our Victorio project, the sheer scale and mass of mineralization that we see there, where we have consistent mineralized zones that are over hundreds of meters in thickness, right? So it's when we start looking at what we have every day, we get excited and have our heart skip a beat because we find something that's new and exciting, and the fact that it connects back into the U.S. supply chain needs or the Western supply chain needs for tungsten or other critical metals adds to that excitement.
So while you're in New Mexico, you're also in Nevada, correct?
Nevada. That's correct. Yeah, so we're in
Okay.
Eastern Nevada, so we're the Tungstonia and the Eagle project. So
I always tell the Investor News audience check out the background of the CEO, and in this case, Brett Marsh. As an entrepreneur, what made you decide to take on the strategy, which, if you ask me, it was brilliant foresight, to go look at past producing tungsten mines and then put them together? Because that's basically what you've done, yes?
that's correct. So past production basically makes exploration a lot easier, to be honest, right? And so knowing that folks back in the 20s, 30s, and 40s were actually able to be profitable in some of these areas, lends a lot of credibility to what we're doing now because we know that they've been profitable in the past, and so we think that that's something that we can move forward here now. And so the fact that there's several of them together in an area just makes us believe that the mineralization system itself is much larger than was previously worked, and that's actually what we're starting to see as we advance our exploration programs. That we've got, especially in our Eagle project, we've got something that could be potentially extremely large.
Okay, well, tell us a little bit more about the Eagle project and why you think it is going to be potentially so large.
Well, so like I said earlier, we've already expanded the scope of the mineralization at the surface to almost 6 square kilometers, and so that in itself is very large, and that's only for the vein system that we see there. So we've got tungsten, silver, rubidium veins that basically run perpendicular or run vertically through this project. When they encounter the host rock on the outside, they create a tungsten skarn, which is very conducive to bulk mineralization. And so what we've actually seen there now is you've got extremely large areas and footprints that add in tungsten at the surface, right? And so that's really the exciting part to us is we see these features already at the surface, and so it's not a situation where we have to drill hundreds of meters to get down to the mineralization. That we see it, and we're actually able to start prioritizing our drill targets and really starting to define this. And so when you look at a future scenario where this could potentially be mined, it's something that's very quick to develop and get into the market just because it's definitely sitting right there at the surface.
So, at the end of this tungsten rainbow that you've been chasing, you've also found some additional critical minerals that we're very excited about in tracking. Rubidium, for instance, and of course, we
Mhm.
love silver. Jack always says that silver is the number one technology metal. Can you tell us a little bit more about some of the other criticals you are discovering on this tungsten trail?
Yeah, so we've got antimony present in pretty high amounts at our Tungstonia project, or sorry, at the Eagle project. But then when we also look into Victorio, we've got a significant amount of molybdenum that actually comes in, which is a very sought after industrial metal. And fluorspar, which is extremely interesting in the fact that it's very highly utilized in a semiconductor manufacture for the acid that it can generate, and so that it actually has a very significant component to what we're looking at for the economic story at Victoria. In addition to those, we've also got beryllium and rhenium that come in with the deposit there at Victoria. So there's several levers that we can pull with the U.S. government to help satisfy the critical metal needs here in the United States, in addition to the strong foundation that we have with tungsten.
I was talking to Power Metallics, Terry Lynch, on Sunday morning, and we were really getting into the conversation about how investors who just invest in technology and AI should really be looking at the resource sector right now because
Yeah.
this is such an exciting opportunity. I don't know if you agree, but we just see this as an explosive area of interest for new shareholders.
Yeah, I agree with that completely. When you look at some of the metals investing history, you're always talking about big metal type things, steel and very large industrial type components. But now when you start looking at tungsten in particular, it's one of the key components for semiconductors, and tungsten hexafluoride. And so it's really very interesting to where, if investors are into tech, for example, to kind of go back through the value chain and look at all the inputs that go into that technology and start investing in those companies, because we've actually seen with a lot of the supply shutdown that comes out of China, how many of those metals start to impact other industries, specifically tech and many of them being technology industries.
Well, we're planning on doing a CMI masterclass, but for those of you that want to learn more about Spartan Metals and following the tungsten rainbow, I recommend you go to the following website for Spartan Metals. Thank you so much, Brett Marsh, for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Tracy. It's nice to be here.